Teens in Corpus Christi showed up to the American Bank Center today to let their inner bookworm come out. Teen Book Fest by the Bay hosted their 5th annual Teen Author Book Festival. Dozens of authors came out to today's event for book signings, discussing their work, and even holding workshops. We spoke with a few teens who say despite having technology, reading is still very important to them.
It's not something you really get to see anymore, and it keeps you attached with the real world.
I like it because you can imagine what you read and feel like you're in it, and you just get more imagination.
Very true. The book festival is hosted every year by Coastal Bend librarians and teachers to promote the joy of reading, and it's all made possible by grants and donations.